All right, welcome Telarus Partners to another executive track. I'm Rich Goetz, General Counsel for Telarus, and today I'll be talking about employee liability. Now, like with all legal presentations, I am not your lawyer. Here's my disclaimer. Hopefully this will give you some ideas on things that you can talk about or talk to about with your own legal counsel about these issues. So, with employee liability, there is no way that I could take time to talk about every type of employee liability that's out there. So I'm just going to talk about a few that we've seen come up with different questions that we've gotten from partners or maybe a little bit more common. So first thing, worker classification. Number two, we're going to talk about written agreements and getting things in writing. And number three, just kind of general employment liabilities that we've seen come up. Okay, so the first one, worker classification. So when you get to the point, if you haven't already, of getting to the point where you're going to hire an employee or hire some help, additional resources, the first question that usually comes up is, are they an independent contractor or are they an actual employee? Okay, a lot of times it's really convenient just to say, hey, we're going to call them an independent contractor, and then I don't have to worry about payroll taxes. I don't have to worry about workers' comp insurance. I don't have to worry about all of these types of things. There are consequences to doing that, and we'll talk about that in a second. Some of the key elements that we want to look at in this test that they use on whether this is an employee or an independent contractor, the biggest one is control. Who is controlling what the employee is doing? What they're doing, when they do it, how they do it. If you're the one that's kind of dictating how that happens, that's probably going to be an employee. Now, our relationship, Telarus's relationship with you as a partner, that's an independent contractor relationship because we have a contract that says we're paying you to do certain things, but we don't dictate to you when you have to get to work. We don't dictate to you who you have to talk to or when you have to talk to them or what products you have to sell or services you have to sell. So you're an independent contractor. So keep that in mind as maybe a model of how this works. So if you're hiring a true independent contractor to work for you, this is something you're just saying, hey, this is the end result of what I want. I want you to write me code for this system. Yeah, they might be an independent contractor, but if you're dictating all of those things to them, they're probably going to be an employee, and there are consequences to that. Okay. One kind of caveat is that oversight is not the same as control. So just because you have some oversight of that person, especially in the form of compliance with the law to make sure that they're doing things the right way, is not going to be considered control for that analysis of whether someone's an independent contractor or an employee. So just worth mentioning that just because you have some oversight doesn't necessarily mean that's the same as control. And then another question to ask is who provides the materials, uniform, all of those types of things, the documentation, who provides that for the job to be done. So just a couple of factors to consider. Second thing, if we misclassify a worker and we call them an independent contractor when they're really an employee, the consequence for that is that the labor union or the labor commission for each state can actually go back to that company, reclassify that individual, and go back to for back pay for all of those employees that fit into that category. So if you have salespeople, for example, and you call them independent contractors when really they're employees, if they didn't earn enough commission to equal out at least minimum wage, you'd be on the hook to pay them all back pay for all the hours that they've worked to equal at least minimum wage. And then unfortunately, if you've done that and they can show that you did it knowingly or intentionally to get out of paying taxes, then there can also be penalties or punitive damages that can be awarded that way too. So just be careful when you're hiring someone. Make sure that you're not calling them an independent contractor, not withholding taxes, not paying workers' comp and all of those things, just to try to make it less complex, because it can really backfire on you. Okay, next one is written agreements. I feel like a little bit of a broken record here. Everything that you do should be in writing with this caveat. When it comes to written policies, Only worry about putting a policy in writing if it applies broadly, if you have every intention of training on that policy, enforcing that policy, and disciplining those who violate the policy. What ends up happening a lot of times is we adopt a policy that we don't really train on, we don't really do anything about, and then when an issue comes up, that employee is going to use the fact that we violated our own policy as evidence of your negligence. And so it'll be used against you if you're not complying with your own policies. So if you won't enforce your policy against your very best employee, then it probably shouldn't be a policy. So that should be kind of your standard is, hey, if our very best employee commits fraud, will we fire them? Yes. Okay, if you will fire them, that's probably a good policy that you don't want anyone working for you that's committing fraud. Okay, but just use that as kind of your standard as far as what you want as written policy. When it comes to written agreements, if you have independent contractors, make sure that you have written agreements in place with them. If you have employees, make sure that you have offer letters in place that kind of set forth what kind of benefits do they qualify for, what benefits don't they qualify for based on their position. Set those things out in writing up front so that later you don't have an employee, a disgruntled employee that now feels like they've been taken advantage of. They come back and say, well, you told me X, Y, and Z. You have to have that written document to say, no, that's not how it happened. Look at the agreement or look at the offer letter. This is what was included. Okay, and then the last thing, written bonus structures. If you've got bonus people that are on bonuses, that earn commission bonuses, make sure that's in writing. If you have quarterly bonuses or different type of spiffs or different types of incentives, whatever it is, just make sure it's in writing. Because the same thing, if a salesperson feels like they performed, or a salesperson or anyone else earning any other type of performance bonus, but if they feel like they've performed and they've done their job, and then later on you say, no, you didn't qualify for this, and you don't have anything in writing to show them why, you're just asking for problems. So put it all in writing. You're going to avoid a lot of employment potential liabilities on the employment side. Okay, next thing, employee liability. So these are just kind of general liabilities that we see all the time. Policies, and we talked about this briefly before. If you're not going to abide by your own policy, don't adopt it. It's going to be worse for you in the long run than having a policy that you don't comply with, okay? People will use that against you if you don't comply with it. Second thing, seek professional counsel. Employment law is one of those really specialized areas that is nuanced, and what applies in one circumstance won't apply in another, and what applies to a company of this size may not apply to a company of that size, and so all of those things can add up. So make sure that when you do seek counsel on these types of things, even if you've had a lawyer friend that does some types of things, make sure they specialize in employment law. I don't understand employment law as well as someone who does employment law every day. Employment law is something that I do this much every few days or when it comes up. And so we still, Telarus still uses outside employment counsel on those types of specialized issues because it is very nuanced. So make sure that you understand that. Don't just go to the same lawyer that you have do your contracts or whatever. If they don't have a background in employment law, really seek out someone who is competent in employment law because it is very specialized. The other thing, whether it's a law firm or whether it's an HR firm, sometimes you can save some money, and HR firms are just as good in those types of areas on how to avoid risks in employment areas. So that's something that I would really recommend is just always seeking that counsel from someone who understands the rules before you just make a decision and get yourself in trouble. And then the last thing that will keep you out of trouble with a lot of this stuff is just to do the right thing. Employees, disgruntled employees, former employees, terminated employees, whatever it is, a lot of times they can deal with those types of separation or deal with certain issues if they feel like they've been treated fairly, if you're human about it, if you're trying to do the right thing. If they feel like it was cold or heartless or unfair or deceptive. Those are the types of things that get emotions involved, and it makes it really, really tough for people to move on. If you treat people fairly, treat them human, then it kind of it lessens the risk of any type of litigation or liability coming up. So that's all we have for the kind of the miscellaneous employment issues. I'm always here as a resource if you've got quick questions. Hopefully I can point you in the right direction. Otherwise, wish you the best of luck out there, and we'll talk soon.